Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Things We Know. Before we get started, we want to share with you a really exciting announcement, which, if you've listened to the last couple of pods, you maybe already know, but we want to put it here at the front end, which is Kari and I have created a masterclass called Unstuck and Unstoppable. So
Woo.
if you're feeling, yeah, woo! If you're feeling stuck, like you're standing on the edge of something more, but you're unsure how to take this leap, it might be for you.
Yeah. I mean, this is the time to break free from any hesitation or self-doubt or spinning in place you're experiencing, which is so many people. And I can just tell everyone's ready to like, oof, move into something that feels different. So
Yeah.
join us for Unstuck and Unstoppable. It's a powerful masterclass designed to help women just like you move from that uncertainty into bold, clear action.
Yeah, in this transformational session, you're going to learn how to break through the barriers that have been holding you back. You're going to reconnect with your power and your purpose, and you're going to step confidently into your next best chapter yet. Sound familiar?
So this is your moment to stop playing small and start living the life that's calling to you. No matter what's going on around you, that's still possible. It's always possible for you to choose. So if you're ready to move forward with confidence and create what's next, choose what's next, this masterclass is for you.
Yeah, we're super psyched. So all you have to do is go to our website, which is thethingsweknowpodcast.com, click on masterclass, and it will take you there. This is for you because you're not meant to stay stuck. You're meant to be unstoppable. Please go
Cannot
straight.
wait.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you.
Yes.
And please go just to the website and click on masterclass.
See you there.
Yay. All right. Now let's move into today's topic.
Yes.
Ah,
Today we're actually talking about something that sounds really simple, but almost never is. And it's setting boundaries with family. We have talked about boundaries a lot, but when it comes to setting boundaries with family, it's really, really difficult. And I just really quick want to say, I remember in our training when we were learning about this, I was like, okay, I got it. Setting boundaries, even when it's difficult, when it's uncomfortable. No, it is disappointing people you love and still
mm,
being okay with it, knowing it's for your best, right? So you think people who love us would most respect our limits, but often those are the very people who cross them the fastest, not because they're evil or even stupid, but because it's just kind of baked in, right? It's baked into
mm.
some family culture. So if you've ever tried to hold a boundary and found yourself spiraling into guilt, second guessing, or a total identity crisis, you're not alone. We're going to unpack the real reasons why it's hard, what some of the research says, because again, these are the things we know and have learned. There's a lot out there, and how to find your footing again without turning into the villain in your own family story.
Oh, that cuts deep. The
Yes.
villain in your own family story. Yeah, I mean, I think what you started with, the idea of like this should be easy, but it's not. It should be easy because you think, as you said, the people who love you, it should be easy to go to them and just sort of say, this is what I need. But I think this is quite frankly kind of the hardest way, hardest area in terms of setting boundaries. And, this isn't about cutting people off or cutting people out of your life. It's about choosing peace over people pleasing. And, it's especially hard when it's sort of been baked into childhood. I
Mm.
am the oldest daughter, I'm the oldest granddaughter, I'm the oldest niece. Um, you know, so I do feel that sense of responsibility to be the helper, to be the peacemaker, to be the one that doesn't make waves, which is hilarious since I make tons of waves. But um, you know, these roles, middle child, youngest child, these roles run so deep, and so consequently this is not an easy thing. Even as you start to work on it, it's going to take time. You're going to stumble. So during this pod, we're going to share some of the truths from our own lives, some of the things we've learned from coaching, and then again from experts. And of course, we're probably going to laugh because we always do.
Yeah.
But setting a boundary can be super awkward and feel super scary.
And and actually, so can not setting one. So we'll get into that. Right? Like
Totally fair.
not setting one also sucks. Which is why we have to have this conversation. So we're gonna start with why this is so hard. And just it's so funny coming into this, we knew we were gonna talk about this. All of my coaching calls with clients this week have been about boundaries with like their grown adult children, with their um adult relationship in their midlife with their parents who are elderly, with neighbors, right? So it's been so interesting that like this came up this week. And it is hard because there's just so many expectations and stories we tell ourselves about what I should do or what is expected of me. And we talk a lot here about getting rid of shoulds and expectations. And so this really is an invitation to be authentic, really, but it's hard. Family knows where your buttons are because they helped install them. You're not just
Oh.
setting a boundary with your mom or your brother, you're bumping up against decades of roles, expectations, and conditioning. Bowen family systems theory calls this process differentiation, the
Mm.
ability to separate your own identity and needs from the emotional system of your family. And it's hard work.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you have confused love with loyalty. The idea, we've talked about this before. So, love, safety, and belonging are the three things we all need as humans. And if you have this story or experience or belief that if you speak up, you're going to be called ungrateful. But then if you stay silent, you start to disappear like, oh, that, yeah, you're right. Either one is hard. Not setting boundaries is hard.
Mhm.
Setting boundaries is hard. So this comes down to choose your hard. I
Mhm.
love what therapist and author Neirdre Glover Tawwab, I'm going to assume, says in
Mhm.
Set Boundaries, Find Peace. If your boundaries upset them, that's proof they were necessary. If your boundaries upset them, that's proof that they were necessary. And again, this can hit hard because just one no can change family dynamics extensively.
Mm. And that is a really good book. I have it. And it does. And it often keeps people from wanting to do it. They think it's going to change everything. But what if it changes everything for the better? What
For
if,
the good.
just like
Yeah.
anything, I always say setting a boundary, I've learned it is like when people are so, we were so afraid to wean Peter off of his binky, right? Or people are so afraid to take away the unhealthy snacks. But, everyone adjusts. It does. Sometimes it wasn't that pleasant taking away the binky. Replacing unhealthy snacks with healthy ones was way easier than I expected it to be. Um, but always we make way too much of what the no is going to cause than what actually happens. Because if at least you're being true to yourself, it isn't worse than not saying no.
Yeah.
Anyway, Prentice Hemphill, another thought leader in this area of boundaries and guilt, says guilt is the price we pay for growing. That one gets me every time. It reminds me of the birthrights that we learned about,
Mhm.
which is the right to be separate and still belong,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Because we talk a lot about this. Love, safety, and belonging is like every human needs it to feel whole, to feel like they're not in fight or flight. So when you do something new in a family system, even if it's healthy and wise, it can cause waves. I mean, and the meta 30-foot view of that is it's going to cause waves because it's inviting everybody to grow when someone's growing. Doesn't mean they're gonna. And the reaction
Yeah.
to it is what we think is the problem. So even if it's healthy and wise, it causes waves. And often what comes up first is grief, the loss of an ideal. And we, in our recent retreat, we talked about grief, and I've since talked about it with somebody I coach who was there, and we had a text exchange about it, and we just don't know that it's grief. And as
Yeah.
women, we kind of pass over it, but it's actually grief. It's the loss of an ideal. It's the loss of a pattern, and that feels like safety. The realization that you can't keep the peace and keep your self-respect at the same time. Ooh,
I know all of this is so ouchy.
I know. Probably why it's important.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess, yeah. If it wasn't ouchy, it probably would it'd be easier and it would
Yeah.
also not be that important. All right, so let's just take a moment and really talk about what a boundary is because there's a lot of confusion about that. A boundary, it's funny because I think you hear the word boundary and you think of a wall, right? And keeping people out, but it's not a punishment. It's not about control. It's about clarity. It is basically just saying, this is what I will do, and this is what I won't do. And as Brene Brown puts it, boundaries are simply what's okay and what's not okay. And I think one of the things that strikes me too is even though it feels ouchy, and when you say the boundary, it might be reflected back, you might get pushback. Ultimately, the clarity piece is what's so important because it is showing how you want to be treated. And so it in some ways makes it easier for them. Maybe not right at the first moment, but like eventually they'll understand they don't have to overthink anything. Like you've been super clear
Mhm.
on these are my boundaries.
Um, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think in my own growth, and I'm trying to think, I'm thinking about a relationship with a like way back with a former coworker, but just I remember observing it and also bumbling through it myself, which is, boundaries are not a wall. Loving boundaries like are filters, right? They're like
Right.
they're an expectation and they're a clarification. They're a great way to communicate. It's not like, I love that you just said it's not a punishment because we've seen people be like bark something. That's a boundary. It's like, okay.
Right.
Generally we communicate boundaries from a calmer place, from a, but yeah, I do think they might need to be screamed out sometimes if they're being crossed. I just think it's important to know that a boundary can be very loving and can create a lot more freedom for everybody if they know what's expected. So thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Terry Cole, who's author of Boundary Boss, which I haven't read, but I've read excerpts of, says you don't need permission to protect your peace. I really, really love
Mm.
that. I think, gosh, I mean, uh, it's like a very fast moving slideshow when I think of the hundreds of women you and I have talked to. Like you can just see the resignation and the exhaustion and from the roles they play of like, well, yeah, I got it. I mean, I can think of a few people who came in Chicago, right? Like who have parents they're taking care of and other like people expect this of me. I kind of need to do this. Like there's a lot of, well, I can't totally tell them not to come. I see this so much of people in my life, and I think that they don't know that they actually have the right to protect their peace and decide what's too much and what needs to be protected. So, here's a good gut check. If you're holding a grudge somewhere in your life, or if you're feeling resistance and about something, about a role you play or about something you show up for that you haven't really evaluated in a while, it might be because a boundary was needed and never named.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you mentioned the last retreat, the retreat we did so that was in Arizona. The retreat we did in Chicago last fall, we talked about boundaries, and that's why a lot of
Mhm.
this came up at that time. And it's hard especially when there's some caretaking involved in the family, right? That as the daughter, the niece, the whatever, you should step up and help. Um, and if it's not in alignment for you, like the worst thing you can do is help from a place of resentment. So
Mm.
again, I think boundaries come across as sounding so, I wish there was a softer word for it because it comes across as sounding like you're putting a line in the sand. And what you're really doing is just inviting everyone to show up in a loving, caring, authentic way. And you're not going to do that if there's resentment involved.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, and I think that I've experienced it both ways where I'm in such flow because like expectations were communicated and respect around it happened, and so like so it's a sign that I did boundaries well, wherein there was times of burnout and just agitation and like you know, really pissed off. Like that's not a great sign that I did it the right way. Because obviously, if I'm still really pissed off, I didn't really get my needs met. I didn't protect my peace. So I think that's always a good, you know, evaluation. Are you doing it well or not? So let's talk those tools, right? So if you're listening and wondering how to actually say the thing, some real life scripts you can try. Let's take turns on these. Like I have 4 examples here. So one is I love you and I'm not available for that.
Have you tried that one?
I have.
How'd it go?
I have. I had to use this with somebody in my life, like not someone I'm related to, but somebody I'm pretty close to. And later, later it was expressed to me that they appreciated it, but at the time it didn't go over really well. But later it was like I appreciated just the state change it gave our conversation is what it was. And it was because that person, the reason I'm trying to be vague about it, because they were, speaking about someone else we both love.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I happen to have just been on the other side of some boundary setting. And in the moment, I was both so very proud and also like, oh, and it was with Liam. And so I don't know if he'll listen when he's editing, but I was really proud of him because when we put together the videos for the Save Act that we did, these weren't podcasts, they were special videos we put out on YouTube if you want to take a look. We had two. We needed some editing. We needed some clips pulled out. And because we did it over a weekend, he was, he was still living his life, but he was dipping in and out trying to do this. And at the end of the weekend, he called me and he said, I don't really want to, if you ever have things like this again, I don't really want to work on the weekends. I need to use that time for downtime and taking care of my health and everything. And I immediately was like, absolutely. Also, Kari and I don't want to do this on the weekends either, so it's not going to
Yeah.
happen very often. And I was so proud of him for setting the boundary. And at the same time, I was like, I've only done this once. Like, why are you setting this
Right.
boundary already?
Right.
But it gave me a minute to be like, you know what? Honestly, Kari and I don't want to. We spent a lot of time that weekend working on all of this too. And while it was incredibly important, and I'm so glad we got it out, I just was like, it felt crunchy at the moment,
No,
in the
I
moment,
did. And it
right?
it happens for you and I a lot where people want to talk to us on days we weren't planning to work. And
Right.
so we dip in and out of being good at this and then feeling resentful. So it's
Well,
good that he's modeling it. And he probably learned
totally.
the ability to do that from you in other ways because you're good about protecting your time when you want to. So I think it's great. It does remind me of that time when Peter was in the hospital and he was like, I need you to step back. And I was, calling and arranging stuff. And it's like, ouch, and good for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and hopefully ultimately that's the feedback you get from any person that you set a boundary with is it might
Right.
acknowledge that it will probably feel crunchy for them and eventually if they're a person that honors you and your friendship or your family relationship, they will be happy that you did it. It probably will
Yeah.
very rarely go over really well right at the gate. Um,
Our friend Elijah has a great response that she shared at our retreat and she shared
I
before,
forget.
which like when you're feeling the sting of someone setting a boundary with you, but you also, instinctively know intellectually that like you're proud of them for doing it. Thank you so much for telling me that. It's like I really appreciate knowing that. I really want that for you. Like it's so helpful to like project it out while you're going,
Yes, that's such a good point. Yeah. So if
yeah,
you are on the receiving end, and I think I did actually sort of say that to
yeah.
him now that I think about it, because it
It's like,
wasn't a text. He called me and it was like, so I need
yeah,
to tell you. And I was like, but I did. I think I did say that. Like, absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And also his reasoning, like he didn't need to give me a reason, but he was like, the weekends are when I take care of
sure.
myself. And I was like, absolutely, no problem. Um, so I forgot about Elijah's. Thank you so much for telling me that because it does. It then you're right. It's like energetically, it's also it's a gratitude or an appreciation that really then fills you back up in the moment when you're feeling a little, ooh, that hurt. But so going back to sometimes we get asked to talk on times when we're not on not work days for us. And
Mhm.
another sort of script is that doesn't work for me, but here's what I can offer. I
Yeah.
think I've said, I can't then, but here's some other times. I
Yeah.
doesn't work for me feels a little, I don't know, little formal. I don't know. Something about that doesn't work
It's
for me hurts.
well, I think maybe I was thinking of it when I wrote this in the context of, can you meet with me this week? Oh, it doesn't work for me, but here's what I can do. Is
Yeah,
kind of like that's just not going to work on my schedule. Obviously it doesn't have to be word for word, but
correct. Right.
it reminds me of how I've shared with you here before about how my dad, I didn't even realize till this moment, like that was good boundary, example setting, which was when we'd ask for stuff, we'd ask, can we go to this? Or can you do this for me? Or can you loan me some money or whatever? He would be like, I always want to say yes. Let's sit down and talk through why I might need to say no. Let's like
I
figure out if
love
there's
that.
any reason, he just used to always like
That is
invite the
such,
conversation that way.
yeah, I think that is a fantastic way of setting a boundary because then there's some co-creation in that boundary.
Yeah.
There's some
Yeah.
ownership from both of you.
Yeah,
That was
I'd love to
brilliant.
say yes. I'd love to say yes. Here's the reason I gotta say no, though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Here's another one. I need to take space so I can show up how I want to. This is so important in romantic relationships. Like
Yeah.
weirdly, I don't know why I'm saying weirdly. It's just that they're kind of I haven't heard about them in a long time, but the Smiths, like, there was a bit there
Oh,
where Will Smith and Jada Smith were saying a lot about how to be married in their 50s, right? They were and that was a nugget I heard him say that I just still have to give him credit, even though I don't know what's going on with them at all, and if any of that was genuine. But it was, I can't love you the way I want to in this moment. I need a little space. I'll come back when I can be loving. So it reminds me of that. It's like, oh, I don't want to like I don't want to be a snot right now. So give me some
right.
space so that I can show up the way I want to for this. I think that is just one of the most generous, loving boundaries you can make with anyone. I mean, I've done that with my kids, or but it's also why I've let them walk away when they're upset, and just like, hey, I think you're going to need some space. And I've been thanked for that already, by my oldest. Like, thank you for never following me to my room. And I'm like, why would you say that? It's like, because I've watched some of my friends' moms and dads like follow them to their room and keep yelling at them. And I was like, oh, well, that doesn't sound fun.
For any party involved, for sure. This last one I think is fascinating, and again, um, it's just the simple, I'm not comfortable discussing that topic. And
Mm,
probably a line that needs to be said more often than not, especially around holiday meals and get-togethers. If you're in a family who's not always in alignment with their belief system, and I'm not even necessarily talking politics, just belief system in general, it can devolve into a fight very quickly, and no one walks out unscathed in those moments. So being able to just say, you know what, I'm not comfortable discussing this. I'm going to step away. Like maybe the
yeah.
other people want to keep talking. Great, good on them. But you don't need to put yourself in that kind of energetics. And as I said, it's not ever going to end well.
I had this just very recently in a online conversation where I was like, I am totally available if we can discuss facts and not opinions and fear. Like I
Mm.
think that if we're going into the areas of opinions based on fear and not on facts, it's just not going to be worth either of our time. And then it was over.
And good.
It's fine. Yeah, there's a boundary on my time and my sanity. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
you're right. When I wrote that again, I was thinking of, it can be so tempting to get involved in gossip. And I'm not saying I don't do it. I'm just saying I try not to. I feel particularly gross when, like, it's that whole trope that Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and you've seen it like in that, what's the movie, like Wine Country or something like
oh
that.
yeah,
But
I
I mean, you
love
see
that
it in a lot of
movie.
things. It was in White Lotus too, where two white women,
Yeah.
it tends to be white women, but it may be women of all types, like two women on, like, amongst friends, get alone, and they're like, can I just say, they start with, can I just say, and
Yep.
they're like, oh, no, no, she she does look great, but she also looks tired. Those kind of
Hmm.
things. Like if you want to have a boundary, like a loving boundary around, honoring everyone and hopefully, you know, inviting people to be at that level so that doesn't happen to you when you step out of the room. I think there's some ways you can do that that don't make you seem above everybody, but just like let's not do that, and it,
Yeah.
it is it is tough because when there's alcohol and there's like maybe you do agree, right? But like there's an opportunity to have a boundary around how you're going to feel later. I would have a way worse hangover from gossip than I would from drinking.
Yeah, it is poison. And again,
It's yeah.
not that I don't do it, but and that's it, right? When we think of these four things, I'm gonna say them again. I love you and I'm not available for that. That doesn't work for me, but here's what I can offer. I need to take space so I can show up how I want to, and I'm not comfortable discussing that topic. That is, use your own words, right? Like this is
Yes.
these it in the moment when you're about to set a boundary, your nervous system's going a little crazy too. So it might come out a little clunky. This is not about perfection, but this is sort of aiming for your own truth, standing in your own power. Using I statements is incredibly important because you own this boundary. You're not putting it on them at all. So you're sort of staying on your side of the street, staying in your lane. And you know what? It doesn't always land the first time. They may immediately jump to arguing, but this is one of those times where you kind of just repeat yourself. Keep saying the same thing over and over again. You don't
Yeah.
no as a complete answer. You do not need to explain
Yes.
more.
I love okay. Yeah, because that reminds me of that time that person said, you said you want to come over and they went, no.
Yeah.
Or you
And I was like,
invited them to something and they said no, like,
and
no,
they
I
just said
can't.
no and
Like,
walked away. And I was like, okay.
okay.
And again,
Um,
I was like, good on you. In the
right,
moment, it felt
right.
weird, but after the
And
fact, I was like, look at her.
and I should say for anyone who works with either of us and listens to us, like there is there is a total confidentiality. I don't know exactly who you are, but I do know that Lisa also, like me, has clients who live with or are grappling with narcissist family members
Yeah.
or partners, right? So what you just said makes me want to bring this back up. That repetition with boundaries is sometimes the only tool and like the most vital thing you can do is have as few words as possible that you repeat over and
Yep.
over. Like, I love you, I'm not available for that, right? I love you, or I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving, we're staying in a hotel. I'm looking
Yep.
forward to Thanksgiving. So the more you repeat that, like rah, rah, all the gnashing against it really has nowhere to go if you keep repeating something that's just fact and indisputable. And so boundaries, when repeated with somebody who has some, personality issues, will really help keep your peace. And they will allow you to still engage
A
with people
million
you love.
percent.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if you know that that is going to be a situation, like if you know you have to set a boundary, if this isn't something that happens in the moment, Kari and I invite you to do a little mental rehearsal around this. Like picture saying it and what that person's going to say back to you and saying it again and what that person's going to say back to you. And so that it becomes a muscle memory. I have done this with clients. I always jokingly pull from Hamilton and call this talk less, smile more, because we do want so badly to explain ourselves, we because we're feeling uncomfortable when we set that boundary too. And so it's like, well, if I
Oh, because
tell
we have,
you
yeah, we have feelings. We don't
totally,
want to be disobedient or
we and
hurtful.
we want people to like us. We don't want them to take it the wrong way. So we feel the
Yeah.
need to explain it. But the reality of it is, once you kind of bring that, I want to say gauntlet, but then again, it sounds so mean. And boundaries aren't mean; they're loving. But once you lay that groundwork, they're not going to listen to your explanation anyways. So it's just saying the same thing over and over, maybe not identically in word one at, but just being able to really stand your ground in this. You're right. You will see the balloon deflate way faster than if you are trying to explain yourself, because they're going to find holes and pull things out and say things and believe things you don't mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So saying the same thing over and over again is going to be the easiest way to deflate the balloon in the moment.
Right. I just coached someone through this because they have a grown child who is it's really time for them to move out. And and so it reminds me of this Prentice Hemphill quote, which is, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. It's like, I think for our
Mm,
relationship, I'm going to be able to love you and support you more when you move out, because I also love me, and this isn't working.
right.
This is, and so I need you to not be here for us to maintain this relationship. That is so difficult, especially
Oh,
for a parent, no matter what the age. But it really does have to be, I said, even for the one that doesn't like what they're hearing, because they love you, some part of them is going to cheer you on, even if they're pissed off. Some tiny part of them is going to be like, yeah, you go. You deserve that. And even if
yeah.
they never say it or it gets expressed.
Yeah. No, I love that. You talked about the idea of like having to set boundaries if you're traveling, home to see your
Mm.
family. Like I'm going to stay in a hotel instead of staying at your house or whatever. Um, in my mind, it's something that should be spoken, and not written. Like this again, it adds a layer of, but at the same time, the idea of doing this over text, over email, like so much can be misconstrued. So
Yeah.
that this kind of I mean, this is already maybe getting you out of your comfort zone. The next level of that is doing this in a way that you're able to have an on-site conversation about this over the phone, over Zoom, whatever. But I don't think writing these kinds of things out
No,
is
that's true.
helpful.
Have you ever had, like, do you have a memory of holding a boundary where you felt really mean?
Oh gosh. I mean, I probably do, but I can't think of one off the top. Do you?
Um, yeah, like it came to me. I mean, I was thinking earlier about the one with the coworker, but yeah, it also felt really good. But like both things. Like I was like,
Yeah.
where yeah,
But was this an, but I'm
someone wanted to
curious.
come over, and I said, no, we're not. I actually, a lot shifted in my life when Griffin started having seizures, but also my kids were getting older. When they were little, they were used to this just being such an open door. I had so many people. I had a very wide net of people in my life, especially, when I went back to work, when they were, when Miles went kindergarten, when I went back to work full time. I was always working, but full time, and it was out of the house. There's a lot of younger people in my life. When I was involved in different organizations as a volunteer, I definitely mentored some people, and like there's a lot more people in my life that were coming around, and I very quickly started to figure out who my kids enjoyed and who they didn't. And
Mm,
that was an interesting boundary I had to set, which was like, oh, yeah, no, like I have to protect the energy here. And I didn't
mm,
do it harshly or like in a very immediate way until Griffin started having seizures. And I was like, I got to protect the energy around here. Like everybody's
yeah.
been traumatized by this. My circle went way back to like just the original people who are family or like family in my life. And then slowly but surely, I started, reconnecting with some people that were like, what happened to you? Where were you? You were always there for me. And it was like, I was here, and I would have obviously responded if you needed something. And I like can't, I don't, I'll get to that example in a second, but like I can't be constantly available to you right now. Like my kids are older, they need more, and they need more of my time and attention. So does my work. So do I, right? So I remember having to be really clear with like saying, no, actually, I don't want you to come by here, but I'm happy to meet you somewhere else. And thinking that was the nice thing to say, and that hit like a lid balloon. They were like, well, fine. And they took it mean, and so then I felt mean until we got to catch up later, and we really did work that out.
Well, I was wondering if this was, and based on timing, I'm not sure the answer is yes, but was this early in your boundary setting experience? Because I would think, again, I can think of something more recent, but I think the act of setting boundaries does inherently feel mean, until you practice it. I think the more you set a boundary, the more you set boundaries, and you see that the response doesn't mean anybody has to be hurt. You know, the more likely it is that it gets easier and it feels less mean. Does that make it? So was that early on or no?
Yes, I guess so. I
Okay.
mean, I don't think in my life till that point, I think I was always raised to be gracious and be accommodating and be of service, right? So to like make some choices to about time and energy did feel bold, but it felt really good at the same time. I will say where it was really tough with I don't think my brother listens, but um and we've talked about this, but I remember, my brother and I always had a lot of access to each other, especially when he was going through something really, really tough. But I also had really little kids and his were older. So once he was like out of the woods on something that was really tough in his life, I was a lot less available to him, and
Mm,
he really let me have it. He was like, God, remember you used to be there for me, now you don't even. And I was like, I have three little kids, one of them is has a lot of needs right now that we're just discovering and figuring out. So this isn't personal. And I like, and that it wasn't even about setting a boundary. It was about like helping him understand that access is kind of like a boundary, right? And it's not that I was putting up a wall. I literally was like managing my time the best I could.
yeah.
And I still have that with a lot of people who are like, they give me shit that they can't get me on the phone. I'm like, okay, I work on the phone. Like I talk to people for my job. So it's not like something I'm dying to do. Like it used to be when I would leave my office job, that would be, I love getting in the car and like, putting an earpiece in or on speaker and just having a conversation
Yeah.
or going for a walk. And now it's like the last thing I want to do is call somebody. I still do it if I can get in the car and go somewhere, that's what I'll do. Or if I can go for a walk, I'll do it. But I do it because I love people and I need to catch up. I don't do it because I love the act of talking on the phone. And I have to protect that energy. Otherwise, like I got nothing left and I'll be going to bed at like 7. So yeah.
Well, and we haven't really, and you haven't read this, and I'm only about a third of the way through, but a lot of this, especially when we're talking about family, does remind me of the new Mel Robbins book, Let Them, because there
Mm.
is, and I feel like probably a lot of our listeners have read the book or have it on their bookshelf to read. The my understanding for as far as I've gotten into it right now is it's as somebody, so you set a boundary with somebody and they get upset, let them.
Nothing.
That's their thing. Let them have it. Don't argue, don't try to explain yourself. And then the next piece of it is let me. So let me, what am I going to do? Well, in this instance of setting a boundary, I'm going to hold firm to this boundary. This is my empowerment. The let them is letting it go. The let me is the empowerment piece. And this is what, ironically, this is as far as I've gotten in the book because I fall asleep when I read. So it takes me a lot of time to get through books. Um, is the piece around family. She says in there too, let them, let me is easier with a friend or an acquaintance. When it gets to family, let them gets hard. And one of her suggestions, or I guess her suggestion around that is with family, you have the benefit of frame of reference. So when somebody pushes back in your family around a boundary, before you go ballistic in your own mind or on them, think about their frame of reference. Why are they resistant to that boundary? You know more about your family than you do about an acquaintance. And so you can actually think about, okay, well, so and so's getting upset because they feel like they've been abandoned in other areas of their life. So if I'm setting a boundary, that might touch on that abandonment issue. Okay. And still let them, but you get to feel a little softer around it instead of feeling like, because when your family pushes back, that also feels extra hard versus a
It
friend or an
does.
acquaintance, right? So the frame of reference piece, I think, is fascinating in Let Them.
This note here about families having this anything for harmony thing really makes me think of a friend of mine who was sharing with me that like they have a family member that everybody tiptoes around, and it reminds me my sister-in-law who's like for a lot of really hard won reasons in her life has developed such great boundaries around that. And she was sharing with me once, I think it was a sermon she heard, where someone was like, why do we let the most unhealthy person set the tone and create all the expectations. Like everyone's going to tiptoe or anything for harmony. Just do it. Couldn't
Yeah,
you just
yeah,
call
yeah.
her? Like you're just going to make her happy. Just could you just, maybe call her once in a while and then, like those, like make it easier for all of us if we would all just capitulate. That is, oh, that is so unique to families. and
Right.
and it really, or to like giving up yourself to belong. I don't know what that
Yeah.
is. Like keeping the peace is just, it costs too much. And I think it, like if you
Peace at
find
what
yourself,
cost?
right, if you find yourself
Yeah.
coming up against that, congratulate yourself that you're disrupting it. Because I was saying this to someone else I was coaching this week. Like, if nothing else, like, you're not, like, you're inviting, when you set a boundary, you're inviting other people to set their own, and like elevating, it's that rising tide. You're inviting
Yep.
everyone to be like, I don't like it, but good for her. Maybe I should look at how I protect my own energy too. And maybe we could all be a little healthier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Likelihood of that happening in this one situation is low, but her daughter's watching,
Right.
right? Her
Yep.
daughter's definitely watching. So if nothing else, you've done that for your own peace and you're teaching her that that's okay to do. And like that to me just is where these patterns can get broken. And like you said, I mean, they can get upset and you don't have to take it personally. This whole you're making me feel guilty now for setting a boundary, like that's bullshit too. Like nobody makes you anything.
Correct.
Like you,
Yeah.
if you feel some guilt, you know, that's another, like that's a whole other topic. That I listened to a whole podcast around that, where you can literally divide guilt into two camps, which it was, one is the guilt you feel when you gossip or when you're not the person you really want to be, right?
Yeah.
Gossip is just one example. If you are acting out of integrity with yourself, that guilt is really helpful. It's important guilt because it's going to redirect you and get you back on track. Everything else that makes you feel guilty is all conditioning and bullshit and expectations and obligations and all that stuff. And nobody's making you feel it. You are feeling it because of the things you've, sort of either bought into or been trained to do. So you get to untangle all that. And like, that's on you.
Yeah. Yeah. But I want to circle back for a second about the modeling piece of this because,
Mhm.
the not setting boundaries, being a people pleaser, this could be generation after generation. You've seen your great grandma and your grandma and your mom, and now you're doing it. And then you have kids and they're seeing you do it. Like, this is a really great opportunity to break generational patterns. And so if you have to go towards the this isn't for me, this is for my kid, if that has to be that space you're in to set a boundary, so be it. But it'll teach. I mean, apparently I've set good boundaries and Liam's watched because
Yeah.
he jumped right in there and set a boundary with me, which again, so appreciative of.
I know.
So appreciative.
Yeah. I have so many funny stories about where those things come back to bite me. Like, oh, I'm glad I taught you that. Good for you.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yes, the benefits of being a coach mom. Ah,
Uh,
yeah. All right, so let's
Can't you
talk.
just, oh, no, good for you.
Yeah, 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 totally. Oh, who taught you? Oh, it was me. Damn it. Okay. All right. So as always, when we're talking about something like this, even if this resonates so hard with you, this is not an easy thing to shift.
Oh,
And
look at us. We're like this.
I know. I mean, if you're watching the video, you saw how many times I like cringe because I was like, "Oh, that hurts. Ouch. Oh,
Yeah.
ow." So this is a practice. This you may never be perfect, and in a moment of stress or anxiety, everything you've done good might fly out the door in that moment. But the best way to start setting this up sustainably is, as always, breaking it down into small steps. So here's a thing you can try this week if you see this happening. And that's really just speak a small truth. This doesn't even have to be a boundary. Just start practicing that idea of the I statements. Just one time when you could have said yes and you say no. Again, we did this when we are doing this in Chicago around boundaries. It was that idea of when you say no, you get to say yes to yourself. And actually saying no doesn't mean anybody else has to be harmed. They might feel crunchy in the moment, But, being able to just do one small thing that starts to set even an invisible boundary that only you know about, that practice of
Mm.
this will help when the big moments come.
Yeah, I just had this conversation with one of my kids was, it sounds radical, but you don't have to answer every text right away. You don't even have to answer them all. I mean, at some
Can
point
you
you could,
can you
but
remind me of that sometimes? I am really bad. And that's a perfect, but that's such a great example because we live in this world where we do live in this world where we're always available. And
right.
so people can call, they can text. It's really
And
easy, like you, to let things go to voicemail because I don't like talking on the phone. But text, when I get a text and I see I've got no, like when I see other people's phones and they have several texts they haven't read, it makes me want to lose my mind. I can't even
my
comprehend that.
kids' number is really high. Mine isn't. And the only reason I even started to have more than one is because of freaking like, they're getting
Threads.
through with these advertisements, but
Oh
like
yeah.
it's spam stuff that I'm slowly but surely getting out of. But the only reason mine's not zero is because of that, because I am the same way. However, and I don't like to be advicey because like his coaches were like, no, seems like we think we would be, um but one tip I have for my kids around that is like put on do not disturb so that you don't feel rude and conflicted, like you just don't see it, like just put
Yep.
it on do not disturb and
Yep.
don't always have it on you. And they really, Peter's so good at that. Actually, they both actually, my girlfriend's great at not responding to stuff, unfortunately, but
So is Charlotte.
Peter and Miles both go in and out of that, and every single time they take some of that stuff off their phone, or they free themselves of their phone, or they go on do not disturb. They are like, I'm sleeping better, I'm happier, I'm playing guitar more, or so it's like it definitely has less of a hold on them.
I mean, in
Anyway.
this recording alone, because I don't have Do Not Disturb, I have my phone turned over, so I don't see what's happening,
Mhm.
but it shows up on my watch, so
Oh,
I can feel because a text is like a zzz versus an email, and so I'm like, oh, oh, like I just keep feeling the
yeah,
text come through.
yeah. Oy.
Yeah, oi.
Okay, so I picked a song that I love hate. Like I love the words of it, and there was times where, as cheesy as it is, I'm like, that's a sweet song. I like it. Sorry to call it cheesy for people who love it, but like honestly, I did a deep dive on a lot of songs. We usually confer, and I didn't have a chance to do that with you on this one, but we're gonna go with it. It's the Fight Song by Rachel Platten. So the lyrics that I keep coming back to on this is like, it's my fight song, take back my life song, prove I'm all right, my power's turned on, starting right now, I'll be strong, I'll play my fight song, and I don't care if nobody else believes, because I've still got a lot of fight left in me. I think it's enough of the right message to share, because it's it's definitely, especially in a female voice, it's
Yeah.
definitely not the norm. It's not the norm to be like, nope, I don't care. I've got to like, I got to like, fight for me. So I do like it for that reason.
I mean, again, this setting a boundary is not only good for you, but it is ultimately good for the people around you. They do not have to make assumptions. They do not have to try to figure out what you want or need or will or won't do. So it is a loving experience. And again, your life, your truth, your boundaries. If they don't get it, that's on them, and you get to make a decision on how you let them show up in your life. Um, but I think more often than not, especially when we're talking about family, they will come around, they will understand, and they will thank you. And they'll start setting boundaries with you, and you have to be just as gracious. We've given you some tools, hopefully a little courage, a little permission to trust yourself more deeply, because that's ultimately what this is about.
Absolutely. So if this resonated with you, please share it with someone you love or someone you need to set a boundary with. And if you haven't already, hit follow. I'm not suggesting do it passive aggressively. If you really need to set a boundary, have those conversations. But maybe other people will enjoy it as well and take their own tips from it. And if you haven't already, please hit follow, like or subscribe, depending on where you're listening to us, so that you never miss an episode.
And don't forget to go to thethingsweknowpodcast.com and sign up for our masterclass, Unstuck and Unstoppable. Maybe that alone will help you with boundaries and so forth. But regardless, just know that Kari and I are proud of you because we are.
Yes,
Th-
we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.